Gilphas El Dragon, the first head of the El Dragon family who became the strongest family solely through his pursuit of strength. In order to pursue martial arts forever, he ate a fruit rumored to grant immortality protected by the Holy Dragon. However, contrary to the rumors, Gilphas's body grew old, and he eventually died in front of his own son. 1,000 years later, when he awoke, Gilphas had reincarnated as a baby in the El Dragon family, using the new name Jack El Dragon. Furthermore, with enemies from a world known as the Unknown World of Chaos, the El Dragon family had adopted a very strict philosophy of the law of the jungle. As everything changed into an unfamiliar world, Jack was overjoyed. This time I will be able to become the strongest in martial arts. The story initially goes like this. After a long and hard fight against the dragon, our MC managed to reach the golden fruit. He was shocked to see that the fruit actually existed. He sat on the dragon's corpse like a true conqueror before taking a step towards eating the fruit. He believed that by eating the fruit, he would be able to reach the pinnacle of martial arts. Our MC's name is Gilphas El Dragon, and he is highly praised as the strongest in the world. Decades later, Gilphas has aged and is on his deathbed. He is surrounded by his family members, and sitting beside him is his eldest son, Gilliam. Gilphas notices that his son looks sad. He urges him to be a good son in the future, saying that his end has come. Gilly is sad because he will lose his father just as he lost his mother. As he dies, Gilphas thinks of immortality and realized it was just nonsense. However, he took comfort in the fact that he had been blessed with a wife and several children. He told his children that he had no regrets because he had lived a very good life. Although deep down, this was a big lie. Gilpai essentially regretted not having more time to reach the pinnacle of martial arts. Moments later, he died. Suddenly, he opened his eyes again. He was shocked and wondered why everything looked different. He felt his body was different. And sure enough, when he looked around, he found himself with a baby's hand. It was then that Gilphas realized he was a baby in his crib. He was in complete disbelief, but then tried to calm himself down because he had been the 10th star in his previous life. Gilphas concluded that his position was much more normal. He began to wonder who had done such a thing to him. Suddenly, he realized that the immortality fruit he had eaten was not actually an immortality fruit. The fruit's power was reincarnation, not immortality. As he had suspected, this made him smile because he considered it a stroke of good fortune. With this, he believed that this time he would be able to reach the pinnacle of martial arts. As Gilphas heard the cries of other babies around him, he realized that he must have been reborn into the El Dragon family. However, he began to wonder why there were so many babies in this room. A moment later, the servants entered the room carrying bottles of milk. They then grabbed one of the goblin babies to feed it. Gilphas was shocked to see a goblin in this room. He wondering what they were planning? After feeding the goblin with the red liquid, it exploded, spilling a lot of blood on Gilphas' face. He was shocked to see this. Fear spread throughout his body as he tried to figure out what was in the bottle. The servants then decided to dilute it a little and continue feeding it to the children. Gilphas was soon caught by a servant while he was still trying to figure out what they gave him that caused the goblin to explode. He could clearly see that the contents of the bottle were not milk, but seemed to be some kind of magic. He couldn't believe that the servants were feeding a baby with something so dangerous. The servant pushed the bottle of milk to his mouth, and when he tasted the contents of the bottle, Gilphas finally realized that it was ancient dragon blood. He couldn't believe how crazy they were to make a baby drink dragon blood. He finally realized why they said they would dilute it. Gilphas decided to spit it out, but unfortunately, he had swallowed a little. However, he concluded that a little wouldn't kill him. He noticed that the other babies were also spitting out the substance and decided that this was the best thing he could do. It was then that Gilphas realized he might have made a mistake by spitting it out. He realized that if he absorbed all the magic power, he might surpass his past self and eventually reach the pinnacle of self-improvement. He didn't know what was going on, but Gilpas decided to make the most of the situation. He drained the entire bottle, determined to show everyone why they shouldn't mess with him. Even the servant was surprised to see Gilpas so happy. Gilpas drank the dragon's blood given to him. The maid was also pleased that everything went according to their wishes. After finishing the entire bottle, he was placed back in his bed with the other babies who had also survived the experiment. Like most babies, he began to feel sleepy after enjoying the delicious food. 7 years later, Gilpas was seen training his strength by placing a large rock on his feet while doing one-armed push-ups. He reached 1,000 push-ups before pushing the rock away. Looking at his muscular body, he admitted that he really liked it. Apparently, Gilpas had now changed his name to Jack L. Dragon. Jack attributed all his strength to the quality of the dragon's blood in his body. Dragon blood apparently holds a vast amount of power, and even a baby who ingests just a little will gain a body far stronger than an ordinary human. Thanks to the power of the true source of the divine dragon that he had absorbed in his past life, Jack was able to absorb every drop of the ancient dragon's unique power. Jack was able to undergo a transformation that surprised himself. However, Jack realized that he was still a 1-star warrior, which disappointed him. He should have been at least a 4-star. Essentially, stars are the source of one's true power, compressed to its limit. One imagines their body as a universe and lets the stars move within it. It turns out the difficulty increases with each star, because the more stars, the greater the power. And Jack in his past life managed to reach the 10-star level, making him the only person in the world to have ever done so. It has now been 7 years since Jack was born as the son of the head of the family, the current L Dragon. But he was branded an illegitimate child. His mother had died, and his father had never once shown his face. Jack couldn't believe he had such a trashy father. Apparently, he had been reincarnated 1,000 years later, where the world had become a place for the weak to die at the hands of the strong. There was also a strange ritual known as the dragon test. Only babies who successfully drank the dragon's blood were supposed to be trained to become dragon warriors. But Jack hadn't received any training from anyone. He tried to ask the maid some questions, but the maid simply replied that he wasn't at liberty to say. Jack vented his frustration on the maid, reminding her that those who passed the test were supposed to receive combat training. But he was surrounded only by maids and not trainers. The maid acted like a puppet when she asked Jack if there was anything she needed. But Jack refused. Jack could actually take care of himself, as he was currently more focused on building his body than getting combat training. Could he give her information about the other children in the main family? But the maid gave the same answer, that she wasn't at liberty to say. Jack tried to twist the facts to get an answer, but the maid stuck to her words. Jack was annoyed and asked, "Is this all you have to say?" Jack then asked the maid if she was here to be treated badly, but the maid denied it, saying that they were ordered to take care of her personal needs. Jack realized that the maid was a 3-star fighter, and for combat training, she should be willing to help him. Since the maid was not helping, Jack decided to go to the forest. He couldn't believe he had lived with a servant for 3 years, and they had no real connection. Jack expected a response, but he got none from the servant, who always seemed to be ignored. Jack went into the forest and ate a bunch of poisonous herbs that clearly tasted bad. However, he didn't care because he considered it part of his training. Suddenly, he noticed a faint trail following him. He wondered why someone was following him and not coming forward to say anything. He ignored whoever it was and focused on what was in front of him. He saw a wild boar in front of him. He realized that the black mist coming from the person who was following him was not there in his previous life, making him wonder what exactly it was. Nevertheless, Jack showed himself to the wild boar, and true to its name, the wild boar charged at Jack. Jack grinned as the boar approached. He got into the perfect position to dodge the boar's attacks with ease. And once the boar was right in the open, Jack landed a punch to its stomach. This punch left a terrible impact that destroyed the boar's insides and killed it in one hit. Jack was impressed that with just one light blow from him, a 1-star, he was able to take down a boar. Jack then concluded that it was the quality of the stars that mattered, not the quantity. Jack grabbed the boar and put it on his shoulder to return home. On the way, Jack complained about how he was tired of being alone and thought about going on an adventure. However, he realized that the sea would be the only place he could go, even if he wanted to, going anywhere. Meanwhile, the strange man who had been following Jack was shocked that he was able to defeat a wild boar with just one punch without having received any combat training. Furthermore, he couldn't believe that Jack would have discovered his hiding place. He basically concluded that Jack was no ordinary child. Since his mother died young and his father had no interest in him, he concluded that it was impossible for Jack to receive a proper education. However, he was not allowed to run away because he was the son of the head of the family. Therefore, Jack was strictly monitored. The strange man found that things were getting more interesting with every turn. When Jack returned home, he noticed that there were visitors at his house. He could sense the power of these visitors and wondered what they would want from him. He slowly began to walk towards the door to eavesdrop on their conversation, and from what he sensed, there was no killing intent from them. Finally, he opened the door and saw several men inside. He asked, "What are they here for?" He noticed that the men wore dragon emblems on their clothing. This made him even more curious and wondered what they wanted from him. Upon noticing his presence, the men saluted him. They said they came to pick him up because he needed a checkup. Jack nearly lost his mind when he heard this, as no one had told him about the damn checkup. Shortly after, Jack was finally taken to the main house. He never expected to return 1,000 years after his disappearance. The men saw Jack already dressed in his school uniform. It turned out he wasn't being taken to the main house to attend a party, but to attend an academy known as the Dragon's Nest. This was an academy founded by the Dragon family, and everyone born into this family intended to enroll in it. Apparently, they all received education when they were 7 years old, and today was the entrance exam. Even though Jack hadn't received any education from the start, he had no choice but to take the exam. It was an obligation. That's why he was brought all the way from his home in the forest. Jack was frustrated with all of this. It was really giving him a headache. While he was still feeling frustrated, suddenly a blue-haired student named Langus approached him. Langus, who was from Old Scale Village, asked him, "Are you okay or are you in trouble?" Jack turned to face him and rudely asked, "What do you care?" Langus looked shy as he told Jack that he was only trying to help because Jack seemed to be in trouble. Jack was surprised by Langus's approach. He could sense that Langus was a shy child, but he realized that Langus had some kind of power flowing within him. Jack then stood up and apologized for his rudeness. He then introduced himself and told him that he was simply confused as to what the patriarchs had planned for all this. Langus then replied that the exam content hadn't changed from year to year. However, Jack cleared the air, telling him that he actually didn't know what the exam was about. Langus was shocked to realize that the man in front of him truly had no idea what he was talking about. Langus wondered if Jack would be okay since not knowing what to expect during the exam, Langus decided to explain it to Jack. Just as he was about to explain, a group of bullies appeared from behind, calling Liss a dwarf. Even Jack was shocked to hear this. The group of bullies was led by a man named Reborn, who also came from the same village as Langus. Reborn bullied him relentlessly. He asked why a dwarf like him had come for the exam. When he could just go home and play around, Langus still failed to catch the taunt and replied that he had come for the exam. But this only made Reborn yell at him. He told Langus that he was trash. There was no way someone like him could enter a prestigious academy. Reedon continued to laugh at the sky while reminding him that his father was a clone dragon. He clenched his fists. Apparently, the dragon family had a hierarchy established by an absolute king. The beginner class was known as the lower dragon. The regular class was known as the young dragon. And the captain class was the adult dragon. While sitting at the top were the elders, or executive class, and they were known as the elder dragon. However, there was a level below that was reserved for trash, and they were called clone dragons. Fake dragons are those who failed to enter the Dragons or those who couldn't graduate from the academy. They are essentially called fakes, but Langus wanted to prove that people like him weren't fake dragons. Jack then decided to join in the conversation and asked Reedon, "How do you know he's trash? He hasn't even taken the exam yet." Reedon was surprised by the intrusion of this unknown person. He asked, "Who are you? Do we have a problem?" Jack replied that it wasn't. Nothing. This really upset Reedon. He asked Jack, "Are you implying that they are inferior to someone like Langus?" But before things could explode, an examiner appeared to inform the students that the entrance exam was about to begin. He told the applicants that they were required to choose an exam number after registering. Reedon looked at Jack with utter disgust. He promised to always remember his face. Seeing him angry, Jack wondered why young people were so quick to anger these days. Langus was shocked to hear Jack say this, since they were all the same age. Langus then added that anyone would be angry if they were called weak. Jack then asked, "Is this exam mandatory?" But Langus mentioned that one was free to withdraw if they were unable to participate. This surprised Jack, but it further proved to Langus that Jack knew nothing. Langus then advised Jack to withdraw as he might get injured during the test. Jack told Langus that he had no intention of withdrawing. Langus was surprised at how confident Jack was, even though he knew nothing about the test. Jack then suggested they hurry before the test began. A moment later, all the participants had gathered. The examiner stood in front of them to explain the details of the test. He told them that all they needed to do was leave a scratch on the stone in front of them to pass. However, no one knew what the test was. No other weapons were permitted besides those provided by the examiner. To make things more interesting, they were allowed to use their bare hands as long as they could scratch the stone. The examiner then revealed that they each had 3 chances. Knowing this, Jack didn't consider this a difficult test. Naturally, hearing this made Langus shudder. Jack wondered, what's so interesting about this? Because all they have to do is scratch a rock. At first, Jack expected a crazy test, because of the previous test, when their baby was forced to drink dragon blood. But with what he saw now, Jack was really disappointed. The examiner then ordered the test to begin. The first participant walked up to the rock and slashed at it with all his might. But the slash shattered his sword, leaving a loud bang and sending splinters of the sword into his body, splattering blood everywhere. Even with all his strength, he was unable to leave even a scratch on the rock. The boy fell to the ground and fainted instantly. The examiners wondered if he would be able to use his remaining 2 chances, but it seemed he was in too much pain to continue. They declared him defeated and asked the others to drag him out. Jack then noticed that the sky was acting strange. He wondered what he was afraid of when the test looked so easy. Jack then asked Langus about the stone. Langus revealed that it was called the Regeneration Stone and could repair small scratches instantly. The stone also has the ability to reflect damage up to 100 times when attacked with brute force. Jack concluded that the stone was quite powerful. Langus then mentioned that one could actually leave a scratch if the superpower within one's body was properly circulated. Based on what he had just heard, Jack concluded that it primarily depended on proper handling of the ether source's power rather than one's martial arts skills. Jack glanced at the participants and realized that there were quite a few applicants who should be able to pass the test. He noticed that Rital and his friends were also strong enough to pass the test from their seats. He could hear the participants failing one by one after breaking their arms trying to scratch the stone. A moment later, the examiner called out cue number 315. Jack's number, Langus, was worried about Jack and urged him to just stand back, but Jack assured him that he would be fine. As Jack stepped forward, the examiner felt an incredible pressure and aura emanating from his body. Jack was asked to choose a weapon, but he said he didn't need one because he planned to use his bare hands. The examiner asked again, "Are you really not going to use any weapons?" He firmly replied, "Yes, that's right." He assured the man that his fist was enough to shatter the rock. When the other students heard this, they started mocking him, saying there was no way he could scratch the rock with just his fist. Even Langus didn't believe Jack because he was sure his arm and fist would be torn off. Langus started blaming himself, saying he should have tried to prevent Jack from taking this exam. Meanwhile, since Jack had already decided what he wanted, the examiner asked him to continue. Jack examined the rock and recognized that it was made of a mineral he had never seen before. He concluded that it was something that had formed over 1,000 years. He realized that there was a lot he didn't know, but he decided to move things forward. Jack mustered all his strength and prepared to punch the rock. With the power he had generated, he was confident it would be enough to do whatever he wanted to it. His preferred technique was called the A bright yellow aura formed around his body and arm as he slammed his arm into the rock. This aura shattered the top of the rock as it grew, leaving a loud bang and a cloud of dust flying. As the dust settled, everyone was shocked. They were silent for a long time as they tried to process what had just happened. It was as if they had faced a major problem. Jack breathed a sigh of relief, but realized that the technique was a bit too much for his age. He checked his arm and found it was bleeding and his uniform was torn. Instead of praising himself for breaking the rock, Jack concluded that his training wasn't enough. The other students wondered how he had done it. On the other hand, Riton was simply furious that Jack had managed to destroy the stone. Meanwhile, Langus was dumbfounded because Jack was the last person considered to pass the test. Even the examiner considered what he had just witnessed impossible. Only someone with a 4-star rating or higher should be able to destroy the regeneration stone. Since Jack was an illegitimate child, the examiner wondered if he had inherited his family's powers. The examiner also realized that he had seen the technique he used elsewhere. Jack then approached the examiner and asked for his test results. The examiner informed him that he passed and he was given a bottle containing a green substance. Jack asked the female examiner about the bottle's contents, but the woman only gave him a hateful look and told him to stay away. Jack assumed that the bottle might be a reward for passing the test. Jack then returned to his new friend. There, Langus praised him for his great talent. Jack then asked him about the bottle. Langus revealed that it was a healing potion. Jack was confused when he heard this, and Langus mentioned that it was a regular healing potion. Jack examined it once more and realized that the substance did not look poisonous. He began to wonder if the healing potion was actually an elixir. Apparently, elixirs are potions made from extremely rare ingredients and combined with herbs that only grow in secret places. In addition, pure elixir essences from mythological creatures and demons are also added. Drinking the elixir will essentially heal old and new wounds instantly and simultaneously increase one's blood level. However, refining elixirs is very difficult because the ingredients are very difficult to find. This is why elixirs are rarely available on the market. Jay then drank the healing potion and, as he expected, his injured arm healed quickly. Jack was shocked to realize that the healing potion was actually an elixir. Langus then said that he didn't know what an elixir was, but Eldragon's healing potion was much better than the ones from the store. Langus thought this was normal. Meanwhile, Jack was completely amazed as all his wounds healed instantly. However, he noticed that there was no ether surge like when he drank the elixir. Langus then told Jack that he was quite impressive, but Jack didn't believe him. Jack then examined the bottle and realized that it was basically what human knowledge had created over 1,000 years ago. Langus then reminded Jack that he was quite strong. Jack replied that it was because he aimed to be the strongest, so he wasn't surprised. Brayden and his gang of bullies immediately went forward to take their exam, and they all passed. Jack wasn't surprised by this because he already knew they would pass. Finally, applicant 414 was called, and it turned out to be Langus. As he was descending the stairs, Jack noticed Langus was nervous and urged him to calm down, assuring him that he would be fine. Langus basically turned around and told Jack to stop raising his standards so high. When Langus arrived at the exam site, he immediately grabbed a sword, leaving Jack wondering what the boy was really going to do. Langus took a deep breath and launched an attack at the rock. However, he failed to leave a scratch and instead fell. As usual, the examiner told him he had 2 more tries. Langus then got up to try again, but the result was the same. He bounced and fell to the ground in tears. He wondered if he would fail like they said. As expected, Brayden and the others immediately laughed at him, saying that a fake dragonborn will always be a fake dragon. They urged him to give up, reminding him of Jack, that he had previously said that someone as weak as Langus was stronger than them. The examiner then told Langus that he only had 1 more chance. He asked, "Are you going to use it?" Langus began to stutter as he fell into complete darkness. Just then, Jack's voice emerged from the darkness, asking what you're doing. Langus turned around in confusion, and Jack suggested he use a spear instead of a sword. While Langus was still confused, Jack said that he meant what he said. Jack scolded Langus for using a weapon that wasn't suited for him. Jack assured him that no matter how many times he tried, he still wouldn't be able to make a scratch with a sword. Riton and his friends started laughing at Jack again, saying that Langus was taught to use a sword since childhood, and he was never taught to use a spear. At the same time, they believed that Langus would remain his pathetic self, even if he switched weapons. Jack then asked the examiner if they were allowed to switch weapons in the middle of the test. The examiner assured Jack that there was no problem in doing so. Jack smiled at the sky, telling him that he was free to continue as long as he used a spear. Jack stood up like a true motivator. He asked Langus if he was ready to go out like a loser. Struggling to his feet, Langus said, "No." Langus then stood up and told Jack that he would follow his advice and try using the spear. Apparently, Langus's father was not allowed to enter the dragon's lair and was constantly the target of ridicule. Despite this, he never gave up and would make sure to raise his son well, because of all his father had done for him. Langus. He was willing to prove that he wasn't a fake dragon. He remembered Jack saying that he would always get the same result no matter how many times he used a sword. Even though he hadn't known Jack for long, he chose to believe him. The problem was, he didn't know how to use a spear. Jack simply told him to stab it straight into the rock. He urged him not to think too hard and just do it. Langus knew it was impossible for a novice spear user to hit the rock straight away and cause damage, but he would never know if he didn't try. Even though he had just met Jack, he chose to trust him. Because Jack believed in him, he wanted to do the same. Langus took his stance and realized that the ether energy flowing through his body was different from when he was holding a sword. Langus rushed towards the rock and struck it, leaving a powerful shockwave. Brayden and his gang of bullies laughed in satisfaction, saying that it was useless even if Langus changed weapons. But upon closer inspection, they realized that Langus was capable of doing it. They were shocked when they saw this, and even the examiner couldn't believe that Langus was actually able to pierce the rock with a spear. Jack was proud of Langus and applauded him. Langus couldn't believe it when the examiner noted in his book that he had passed the test. Langus was forced to ask again to be sure, but Jack hugged him from behind, assuring him that he had really done it. With tears in his eyes and happiness, he hugged Jack. Breton and his men refused to believe that Langus had actually passed the test, and they all believed it was just luck. The examiner then shouted at the top of his voice, telling the participants that the exam was over and that the next step was the entrance ceremony. Hearing this, Jack was shocked. He couldn't believe that scratching a stone was the only test they had to go through. Langus then told Jack that there might be another test after they entered the academy. Jack then asked Langus what they should do since they had already passed the exam, and Langus revealed that the heads of the Eldragon families would appear to congratulate the participants. Just then, a group of humans with aura appeared in the distance and walked toward the students. Among them was a man who caught Jack's attention, and he asked Langus, "Who is that gloomy man?" Langus couldn't believe it. Jack had just bad-mouthed the heads of the families. Jack couldn't help himself and called the head of the families ugly. But before he could say anything, Langus covered his mouth with his hand. Langus begged Jack to be quiet and not say anything. And even though it was difficult, Jack decided to remain silent. Jack looked at the men who were thought to be Eldragon troops. He was impressed that there were actually some good men, because most of them were 6-star warriors. However, the head of the family, Balsa Eldragon, was an 8-star warrior, making him a feared figure. At that time, there were only a few 8-star warriors left in the world. Jack wondered, how many are there left? Jack then revealed something shocking to Langus. He said he didn't like Balsa. He didn't even care if the man was his father or not. Just then, Balsa stepped forward. Balsa stepped forward with a powerful aura to greet the students. She only spoke a few words to the students, and this was her telling them to be part of the Eldragon family. However, these words felt so heavy next to her aura, causing everyone except Jack to start trembling. Even Langus complained about how hard it was for him to breathe. However, Jack didn't feel anything from Balsa's presence. Instead, all he felt towards Balsa was pure hatred, though he didn't know why. After finishing greeting the students, Balsa turned to leave. Another elder then took over. He told the students that the dorm had expected great things from them. This person also caught Jack's attention, and he began to wonder who the blonde elder was. Jack realized that the base's departure had eased the tension among the students a little. The examiner then stepped forward to reveal that they were going to announce the dorm assignments. Jack was surprised to hear this because he thought they were all going to the same place. Langus then decided to explain to him since he didn't know anything. He told Jack that the academy had 4 dorms. Students were assigned to one of 4 dorms: the East, West, North, and South dorms. A moment later, Jack heard his name called and stood up to leave. He told his new friend to take care of himself, and the two exchanged pleasantries before parting ways. Jack had been assigned to the East dormitory at the academy. He was surprised to see how much things had changed in over 1,000 years. He followed the directions written in his handwritten notes to find his way to his room. He was worried that his roommates would angry because he arrived late, and all of this happened because he got lost. He finally arrived in front of the bedroom door. Excitedly, he opened the door to announce his arrival while greeting his roommate. However, his enthusiasm and joy faded when he saw the figure of his roommate. Suddenly, the video discussion ended, guys. If you like this video, give it a like and write your opinion in the comments column. Because if this video is busy, I will discuss it again for you. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.